My name's Scott Schwartz, and I'm a member of the Chicago Programming Board for StartOut. We have programming boards and events in New York, San Francisco, Austin, Texas, Los Angeles, Chicago, and Boston. Both online and in person, StartOut is a national organization offering education, networking, mentorship, and access to capital in order to foster entrepreneurs and great business leaders in the LGBTQ community. Our programs are designed for you to gain confidence with insider tips, personalized advice, and inspiring events. You'll have the guts to not only take the leap, but to succeed. While all programming is on Zoom at the moment, we've got some really interesting events coming up. I want to mention those as we start off. Future events include Hackout 2020, sponsored by StartOut Austin. Wind Down Wednesdays, sponsored by StartOut San Francisco. And in September, StartOut Chicago is sponsoring Nuts and Bolts of Business for entrepreneurs, discussing legal, insurance, accounting, SEO, and IP areas entrepreneurs don't normally think about. For information about any of these events and more, please visit startout.org. Today's event, Hiring for Entrepreneurs, features an all-star panel from around the country. If you have questions you'd like to pose for the panel, please enter those in the Q&A area on your screen. Now I'd like to turn over this event to our moderator for today, Carolyn, who's Executive Director of Housing at 360 Youth Services here in the Chicagoland area. And I'll let Carolyn introduce herself and all of the rest of our panelists.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Hi, everybody. My name is Carolyn Wahlskog. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And as Scott mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of Housing at 360 Services in Naperville, Illinois. So for folks outside of the Chicagoland area, that's about 30 miles west of the city. And I oversee transitional housing for youth experiencing homelessness, particularly for LGBTQ young people experiencing homelessness. So that is a passion of our organization, is making sure that young people who are overly represented in the child welfare and in the homelessness system access safe and affirming housing. And so part of our work as our organization is to help our staff reflect the young people that we serve. So diverse hiring and finding the right candidates is really important in the nonprofit world, as well as in many of your different industries. So I'm here as much as a learner, as many of you. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to bring some tips back to the nonprofit world as well as the startup world. I'm gonna have each of our panelists introduce themselves and share their name, their pronouns, where they are Zooming in from, and just a little two-sentence bio about you and what you hope to contribute to this conversation. So I'm gonna go, I'm just going to call out some names. So Priya, would you mind starting and telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Priya Parrish, she, her. I'm in Chicago, and I manage a social impact private equity funded impact engine. So our firm invests in companies, both startups as well as more mature companies, whose core products are driving better outcomes in health, education, economic empowerment, and sustainability. And my background has been as an investor with impact, as well as just an institutional investor across asset classes. And early on in my career, I started a number of small businesses in high school and college that put myself through school, and still kind of have that entrepreneurial mindset to everything we do. And as we're building, Impact Engine itself is a startup investment firm. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Priya. We'll go to you, Billy. But you're still on mute.
So I screwed up immediately. That's good. Got that out of my system. My name is Billy Maddalon. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. I am the managing owner of a small boutique hotel company called Unique Southern Estates. We have hotels in North and South Carolina. At our peak, we had 4 hotels that we owned and 6 that we were managing for other groups. We are now down to managing 2 of our own hotels, and so I suspect I'm in a little bit of an exit strategy. This is all I've ever done other than write speeches in politics. So I sell sleep for a living, and I think I do it pretty well. We've done well with it, and I hope I can contribute a little bit tonight about a company that operates pretty much independently of having a human resources department. So we are that's pretty much me. We do all of our own hiring internally, and we also handle all of our terminations internally. And so hopefully I can speak to that from a very small company perspective.
Awesome, thank you. And then Sak.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sak, he, him, and I am the CEO and founder of Paradise for Paws, premier resorts for cats and dogs. So Billy, a little bit in the hospitality, but for a different kind of market. In some ways, I often joke about it that my career has literally gone to the dogs and the cats, I guess, because we cater to both dogs and cats. I started this business about 11 years ago at this point. Started with one location. We operate now 13 locations around the country, about 300 people. Prior to that, I worked for Ernst & Young in Diamond Consulting, got my MBA at Kellogg, and came up with that business idea as part of that. So I've been through all the different stages of it, from the entrepreneur initially with 6 teamers on day one to now about 300. So have gone through a lot of things, and one of the things sometimes I talk about it is I can definitely talk about what things not to do as we think about some of these things. So I think I've made most of the errors that you can probably think of. Hopefully I've learned some of it from some of them and can discuss to help others.
Awesome, thank you. And then we'll go to Chuck.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chuck Porcelli. I use he, him pronouns. I am the co-founder of Azimuth. It is a staffing and recruiting firm, specifically working with manufacturing companies and warehousing companies. So the light industrial vertical here in the Chicagoland area. I'm hoping to provide some insight and some of the experiences and things I've learned helping other companies hire people, as well as all the troubles we had hiring ourselves. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Awesome. And last but not least, Jay.
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself. Jay Porter. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm currently CEO of Revere. We're a tech PR firm. Most of our clients are startups. We are quite small, but we are an offshoot of Edelman, which is a larger firm, so not fully a traditional entrepreneur. I've run larger operations over 15 years with the Edelman network. At Revere, we're currently about 22 people. And again, most of our clients are startups. So very often in terms of, as part of the communications plans, we're helping plan and execute. In the tech space, hiring is incredibly important. And so the potential employee recruit is a really important audience that we spend a lot of time thinking about. And obviously we've also spent a lot of time helping our clients communicate sort of their commitments to diversity and inclusion, given how important that is in the space. And I'm currently in the Bay Area after 5 years in Chicago, just moved back last year.
Awesome, thank you. So for folks who are watching, there is going to be some audience participation, and because I think it would be helpful for us to hear if you are more interested in the hiring process, or if you are a job seeker right now, and if that's where you want some of the conversation to lead. So if you don't mind, in the chat, if folks can just say, I am someone who's doing hiring, I'm looking, if you feel comfortable sharing that, or, okay, awesome. And so we'll just read some of that out. And how this evening will go, we have some posed questions for the panelists, and you can absolutely add some to the Q&A. And so I have some that I will issue and ask different panelists to respond to, and then we'll have time at the end for all audience questions. So it looks like folks are looking to make their first hires for their startups. So that's perfect. That's exactly where we're going to start. I don't think we can start this conversation without addressing COVID. No matter whatever industry you're in, right? In nonprofits, in housing for folks experiencing homelessness, like we're greatly impacted by this, both with staff feeling comfortable coming to work and a lot of people wanting only remote positions, things like that. So I'd love if anyone wants to jump in and just say, how has COVID impacted your hiring process, or what conversations are you having when you're thinking about how you may need to adapt, given that this pandemic doesn't have an end date? Anyone can jump in.
I guess I can talk a little bit about our company and some of the things that we're doing. Of course, it is a extremely challenging time in general. I think from a lot of perspective, and especially as us entrepreneurs and running our companies in a lot of ways, right? Trying to manage a lot of different things, trying to figure out when we do that. But the reality of it, I'll share that with you. We were actually planning on, right before COVID, we had a few key positions on the management team that we were planning on hiring that we actually put on pause. That's just the reality of it, that until we figure out, filter through the clutter and the noise of some of the stuff that's going on, in a lot of ways, we have been very, very fortunate that we kind of we have a great network around us that supports us in what we do, right? So we still anticipate hiring them, but it hasn't been, I would say it's not that we're not hiring, it's more, we're not actively seeking out. It's more like one of the things we talked about is we are always hiring rock stars, right? That philosophy for us has still not changed even through the pandemic, right? A lot of the times it depends on, even through the normal course of the business, it depends on the right candidate for the right position. And we always try to figure that out, right? So that philosophy hasn't changed for us, but we are not as active in hiring process right now.
I'll chime in. I mean, just given the impact of COVID on the economy, we initially, definitely moved to a more conservative position. Pretty quickly, we realized that both from an economic standpoint, but also in terms of being able to offer a really great experience, we paused our internship program this summer, which was hard for all of us. But you move to a position where you're a little bit more focused on making sure that you have work available for the team that you have. I think the counterbalance to that for me is, unfortunately, a number of folks in my broader network are now looking. And so, just taking the time that would normally go to prospecting talent, hiring, interviewing, all of that, I've tried to redirect that to just being, really present for the folks I know who are looking. That always pays off long term. Those people end up being clients or being people that eventually you have the opportunity to hire, and just hearing from them sort of what they're hearing from other companies in the space is good intel. I think we're reaching a position now where we're much closer to hiring. And so again, it's kind of that process of, knowing the talent that's out there that you would like to have, in-house at some point. And I'm beginning to reach out more proactively to folks who've been on my list for a while to see, how their organization is navigating remote work, how they're feeling, if they're looking for something new. And I just think those are all parts of the broader process of just staying connected to the talent pool, that in some ways it's been a little bit easier to be mindful of all those different things, given how uncertain other things have been.
So you're saying that we need to be strategic right now about, while we might not be able to bring new folks into our organization, if we can help them get launched, that's going to return back to us. Great. That's a great advice. Priya?
Yeah, I would just add that I think if your startup is in a situation where you don't need to hire, of course, like you don't want to right now. But on the other hand, if you've got roles and people you need to hire, I think the situation where it's difficult to get to know someone and determine fit and all that, I don't know if that's, it's going to go away in some case, like post-vaccine, but at the same time, the way we work and engage and where we locate, I think is kind of forever changed. Not that it's forever going to be like the way it is right now, but I think we've got to get comfortable and adapt to other ways to getting to know people and then building those relationships. Like, you may pick the perfect hire culturally day one, but if you don't invest in that, and if you don't continue to build that relationship, even in a more remote relationship, then it will break down. So I think, you know, what works, I don't know, it's all a great experiment. But I think like we can't just like be afraid of that new world. And we've just got to be really.
Does anyone else want to add to that question of ways that COVID has impacted your hiring process or pivots that you've had to make?
I know for a lot of my clients impacted by COVID, a lot of their business increased and a lot of their business just shut down completely. A lot of these warehouses and manufacturing facilities were deemed essential businesses, whether they're making small metal pieces for surgical equipment or they're in a third-party logistics warehouse needing to transfer goods from point A to point B. What seemed to be the common thread for each of my clients was the need to logistically plan and figure out a way to do things moving forward based off what Priya was just saying. There was a lot of back to the drawing board. So first of all, how do we bring people in here safely? We don't know a lot about the pandemic. We don't know when it's going to end. What is work going to look like physically in our warehouse? And then how does that translate into how we recruit, hire, and retain people? For a lot of clients, it came down to being very transparent, whether they had a starting class of 20 new employees ready to go for, you know, the last week of March, and they had to cancel that and put those jobs on hold, or they had to ramp up a new starting class of 80 people. What it came down to was, how can we approach this strategically? How can we connect with people remotely, online, video interviews? How do we meet people safely in person? And a lot of our clients have seen success because they were able to apply those logistical solutions that they found to hiring. They were able to apply that to other areas of the business, whether it's their customer service center, their sales center. They were able to take a lot of the lessons learned in hiring and attracting people to other departments.
Great. Have any of you brought any new staff on virtually? And some folks may always bring people on virtually, just the nature of your business, but any tips for either how to interview well on a Zoom to really get to know someone, or to make people feel a part of the team if they can't actually come into the office to train? Has anyone had to do that, or has it mostly been pausing of hiring?
We did it with several interns this summer, which I know is not the same thing. Yet actually, I would say we had greater success in getting them ingrained in the culture than before. And there's something about this that actually helped. And I think some of the things we did is first that we did both individual one-on-ones with almost everyone in our firm, which is easy because there was only 9 of us. So I recognize that. But then we also did several kind of social happy hours on Zoom with different games we played and things like that. And I think somehow together that seemed to make the difference. And I felt much closer to our, I don't know, it's like 6 interns we had this summer than ever before.
I'll just say, you know, we had some remote employees, myself included, because most of my team is in Seattle, but we've got folks in Chicago and New York. So we had already been sort of doing the remote and kind of getting the practice of, you know, how you build culture when folks aren't all physically in the same place. That notwithstanding, it got harder. And I think part of the reason is, thanks for everybody joining us, because I know we all have Zoom fatigue. I think we've had to just kind of switch up lots of things between sort of regular team meetings, more sort of social or sort of game, you know, nights and things like that. But, you know, it's important to have a mix of those things. And it's also important to just let everybody know that you don't have to do everything. I think you have to offer a lot to fit different people's styles. We've also just encouraged people to try to replicate the way that sometimes we work in normal time, where if you're working on a big project together, it's okay to dial into a video conference and just sort of work together some, but like not have it be a meeting. And some of those different ways of trying to replicate the more informal collaboration has been helpful.
Totally. I think, you know, we've had to say, this is a meeting that you need a camera on for. this is one it's okay to have it off, or if you need to, if it's a 2-hour meeting and you need to take a break, you know, you're a human being, you can do those things. Our organization, we had to pivot around fundraising, and so we couldn't have our in-person fundraiser, and so we ended up doing a virtual drag queen bingo. And then my friend's startup did that as just part of one of their Pride events, and so it wasn't a fundraiser, it was just come have fun as a way for folks to connect and feel like they were doing something for Pride since they couldn't be in the parade. So it's been interesting to see how people have done that and continue to navigate that fatigue. So kind of moving on to our next question. So the topic today really is thinking about hiring. So I would love if everybody could just share one nugget of advice, something that you hold true for yourself when you think about approaching hiring. What's one thing that if folks left with nothing else, what do you think they should know?
I'll go. I'd hire people with passion. You know, in the hospitality business, I tell people I can teach you how to do it. I'm not interested in your skills, and I'm not even particularly interested in the background or your experience. I'm looking for people that have a passion to do a really good job for my people. So I'm looking for missionpreneurs, you know, people that are mission centered and focused on good quality outcomes for our customers. And then I've found we make money that way. And so I hate to say it, but COVID has made it even harder in our business to discover people's passion, because it's hard in a very one-dimensional environment to push your passion through a computer screen. So we're pausing because our company's really kind of almost asleep right now until this is over. So when it comes back, we'll start looking for people that are really passionate about working for our guests and putting heads in beds and doing good jobs. And then I'll tell people, don't worry about what you don't know, because I'll invest in whatever I need to invest in to make you a skilled hospitality professional.
I like that. I wrote that down. Missionpreneurs. I don't know how to spell it, but we'll make it up. Awesome. Who wants to go next? I think you're still muted, Zach.
Sorry, I'll go. It's been an amazing ride for us, right? Kind of hiring from the very beginning and kind of scaling our team. And we have tried everything, right? Like from, you know, questions, the formulas, all of that kind of stuff. But one of the things I firmly believe in, which is now a question that we have for our entire hiring team, anytime we're trying to hire, is what is your gut check, right? Because I think sometimes we discount the gut check as not being as scientific, or, hey, what is that really telling you? But to us, that is really a culmination of all of the experiences and everything that we've been through that teaches us, hey, what is that other, if you want to call it X factor or gut check, telling us, right? So that is one of the key for us, even though we have standard questions and some of that stuff do, but we always go back at the end to say, okay, where's our gut at? How are we assessing that? So that's something we do, I'm not sure sometimes we put enough emphasis on.
Thank you. Who's next?
I'd say one of the key things that myself and our company would try and hold dear in our hearts is to really know your company and what you can offer a potential candidate, and prioritize that over what they can offer you. If you're a founder, if you're a C-suite executive, whatever it is, and you're very close to what your company is doing, it can be pretty difficult to let that go, or let a stranger into your family, into your house. So there's a lot of hesitation. You hold on to a lot of biases, whether you know it or not, about what makes a good candidate, what makes a bad candidate. And in order to truly understand what a good candidate is, similar to what Billy was saying, is to really know yourself, know your company. And I really don't care what your qualifications are. I don't care if you have X number of years with Y software, with whatever machinery it is. I'm hiring you to contribute to this organization and to do a job and help us grow it. So I'm hiring you more for what you're able to do with us and what we can do together versus what you've done in the past. So really knowing yourself and your organization will allow you to weed through good fits, bad fits, and assess people and really get to know them to help guide you to make better hiring decisions.
Yeah, I would add kind of in a similar vein two thoughts. One is I've found for really critical kind of hires, I've had the most success when I'm hiring people who I know will be overqualified for the job fairly quickly. And so it's kind of taught me that to think about what is the ideal candidate's next spot. Like the person who's invested in that growth mindset and will continue to improve, they're not going to be there forever. So you got to make sure there's a path or else you will lose them. And you don't want to. Those are the very people you want to keep. And at the same time, that's related to that is, you know, and I do think it is more difficult in this COVID climate we're in, but you have to trust them and they have to trust you, particularly at the startup phase. I think everyone is super critical, and that trust factor, I think is just, it's super important in order for even the most talented person to actually be successful in helping you build the business. And the trust really does go both ways. And again, back to my earlier comments, it's something you start with, but it's also something you have to invest in, you know, over time. And those first few, you know, weeks and months are really critical to that.
I guess just to round it out, and I think it builds on things that Chuck and Priya mentioned, one of my first clients used a sort of tech hiring truism that I think is valuable, but a little bit dangerous. And the phrase is A's hire A's and B's hire C's. What I don't like about that is it's very easy for A to be people who went to your same school or worked at really hot companies before in their career. It can devolve into sort of all those types of unconscious bias. But I think what's really true about that is, you know, I always try to hire people who will challenge me, who are smarter than me. And, you know, if you can instill that in your team, you can be confident that, you know, you're going to have a really high performing team. Whereas if you've got people on your team or you hire people who are a little bit self-assured or are going to be afraid to hire somebody who might have more qualifications than them or who might give them a run for their money, that's just kind of a descending spiral of lack of confidence and, you know, not as strong talent. So I think, again, it becomes really hard, as Priya pointed out, to make sure that you've got a career path for those people. But, you know, I've seen in larger organizations, teams that had that spirit outperformed teams that didn't, were always the ones who were sort of struggling, you know, either financially or in terms of quality. So it's something that, again, it's kind of dangerous in how you apply it, but has been really true for me.
Thank you for sharing those. And so one of the questions that is coming to my mind is, how do you invoke that in the interview? How are you getting to those, to figuring out if those people have that passion or if they are going to make you better? So is there a favorite interview question that each of you have? I know for me, I really like asking people to tell me about a time that they made a mistake, because I can see how that they might handle that, especially when dealing with young people that are very vulnerable in my organization. So can you each talk about maybe a question or two that that you think really helps you in an interview? If you have one.
During the course of the conversation that is the interview, one thing that has helped me connect with an interviewee is asking them about a time where they've had trouble learning something. So you're not necessarily asking what have you, give me an example of something you failed at, give me an example of your learning style. You're asking this question to understand how they approach things, how they learn things, how do they pick up information, what is positive and negative about it, and how they communicate and talk about those experiences, talking about a time where they're thinking, oh, hey, I feel really dumb. Why am I telling an interviewer about a time where I felt dumb? It allows you to have a more vulnerable conversation when you're approaching those topics rather than just like straight on the nose. And you see how they can, you know, tell that story. But hey, I didn't have this knowledge, or I didn't have this skill set. This is what I did about it. This is how it made me feel. And I actually learned X, Y, and Z from this. Is one of my favorite questions to ask, that typically you can find a lot of common ground with candidates by asking it.
Awesome, thank you. What about other folks?
One thing that I've done, and it's a test for the interviewee and the interviewer, is I try to actually get in a conversation about a real challenge that I'm experiencing or we're experiencing that we don't know the answer to, and see it and talk to them about it, because it gauges how quickly they learn. Like, can they understand our business quickly enough to actually contribute something? But also I gauge my own, again, back to that trust thing, like, how do I feel opening up, talking to someone about something that I don't know the answer to? And does it feel comfortable? And does it feel like, do I get defensive or insecure, or do I really open up, and do I feel like I'm getting something out of this, and this is a really good working dynamic, and like, wow, I wish they would be sitting right next to me every day now, not just for this next hour. So that's always been helpful to me. And it's amazing. There are a lot of people I interview and I do not feel comfortable talking about things with them. And it tells me a lot about just, you know, where that trust factor is at. And it comes later on in interview stages, but I think it's really important.
Great, thank you for that.
I think for us, it's a little bit of an easy one, right? But part of it is rooted in getting the candidate to be extremely comfortable to get to know them, right? So because there are people who are not good interviewers, but they're amazing talent, right? Will contribute tremendously. The reason why I say it's an easy one for us, because it's rare that somebody applies to our company who doesn't have a pet, right? So in order for them to get them in their comfort zone, usually one of our first questions is, tell us about your pets. Right, because we are, what Billy was mentioning earlier as well, we're gauging that passion, because without that in our business, that's not the right fit for us in that ways, right? So most people love talking about their pets. If they don't, they're likely not potentially the right candidate for us, right? So that puts them at ease, but that really helps us with the follow-up conversations. So that's one of the things that we use to first ask them about something that we know they should already feel passionate about.
I'll just say I often have the opposite problem being in communications. I mean, a lot of people who are pretty polished and able to spin on their feet. So I sometimes, particularly in terms of, you know, if you ask somebody, tell me about your management style, you know, you're going to get like a bullet pointed list of, you know, great things. I started asking, let's just assume I know somebody who used to work for you. What do you think they'd say about what it was like? And it's kind of off-putting, but when I started asking it that way, I got past like the BS of how great a manager they are and got much more honest answers. I think hiring for managers is a really different thing than just hiring for individual contributors, because of the impact that, you know, they're going to have on their whole team.
Those are all awesome. I'm taking lots of notes. Does anyone else have anything that they want to add?
Well, I'd say, you know, I always like to try to figure out, you know, again, back to passion. I always ask candidates who want to come to work in my company at a management level to share with me what their intrinsic and extrinsic motivators are, or what they're not. I just say, you know, tell me what motivates you internally or doesn't. Tell me what motivates you externally or doesn't. And it's interesting what people will tell you. They'll tell you where they get their gratification, whether money's a motivator, whether power, success, climbing, whether moving. I mean, they will, if you ask the right questions, people will tell you everything you need to know about them. That's a good tool for dating too, by the way. I mean, just learn to ask really good questions and then listen. I'm also a big fan of humor. So when I interview people, I try to keep it light. I always try to use a little humor. And if people don't laugh and aren't happy to be there and don't seem to be good-spirited people, I don't hire them. I like people who laugh. And I like people who don't take themselves too seriously, because a lot of our clients do take themselves very seriously. When you sell sleep for $350 a night, people take themselves very seriously. So I don't need my employees to be in competition with my customers. So I just want my employees to say, you know, this is a great job. I'm lucky to be here. I really enjoy what I'm doing, and I'm getting gratified through the process. And then our customers always seem to feel happy as a result.
Awesome. I love that. I think it's really important for me to, like I mentioned earlier, to have a diverse workforce that reflects the young people that we serve. And I know that I find oftentimes that I have, oh, that was a really great interview, and that person on paper looks just like me, has a similar background, things like that. And then I'm not replicating the type of work environment that I know in my head and my values are. And so I would love, I know Priya, this is kind of your area of expertise, for you to jump in first, of just talking about what are some of the strategies that startups and other businesses should be considering when thinking about how to diversify their workforce.
Yeah, no, I think, and for us, it's hiring, and we're proud that we have a very diverse team, but it's a very similar strategy and skill set to when it comes to us investing in companies. 80% of the companies we've invested in are have women or minority CEOs, which is, in the venture industry, that number is closer to 1%. And so I think there are a few things. One is a little bit of like diversity begets diversity. Like, our team is diverse, so it continues because our networks are different. It's not that we don't have biases. We do, we all do, but we have different ones, and we try to challenge them. And so, to your point, actually, Carolyn, like, I think one thing that's really important to be intentional and deliberate up front is to think about, what experiences do I have, and what blind spots does that give me? And what types of, people with different life experiences could actually fill that in. And so you start to see that as a real asset and something you want, versus looking at people who are different and maybe feeling uncomfortable. And I think what comes from that also is, instead of thinking about, jobs as, how many years experience or what kind of degree, really think of it as skills, right? And the way you get to those skills can come from a variety of things. It could come from prior job experiences. It could come from life experience. It could come from academic training. It could come from inherent ability and temperament. I think a lot of things are down to like temperament, right? And being really specific and identifying them, so that you don't end up just categorizing people based on these other identifiers that may actually not get you the right employee. And then the third thing I would say is that it's really, really important to think about sourcing channels. And we use the word sourcing because we're investors, but I think of that in recruiting talent too. It's the same thing. And if you're going to the same old places, like the same old headhunter or the same old universities and their career services centers, you're going to get the same old people. Because I can tell you, people who are first generation into college, or people of color in college, they don't know about career services centers. They don't know there are people there who are going to help them find jobs. So go to the Center for Diversity, whatever universities you're targeting, or post your jobs more publicly on, not just LinkedIn, but other job sites, and even Twitter, and just, in the asset management and financial industry, there's a foundation called the Twigo Foundation, which deliberately recruits and creates fellowship for Black MBA candidates. And so making sure our job postings go there, things like that. And then also, this does take more work, but I think it delivers value, is have a fairly open door policy and have a fairly wide tunnel at the top, and don't narrow it down too quickly, too fast, without kind of giving candidates a chance to explain why they are the right fit. And sometimes it's in writing, sometimes it's, do a bunch of quick, short interviews. Give people at least, 30 minutes to explain before you really cut it down and do a longer interview. And I think that all of these measures kind of help to fight against it. But you've got to have that strategy, and wishful thinking of having a diverse team it just won't happen.
Thank you for sharing that. Jay, I think when we were talking the other day, you shared some strategies in the ways that you're very open and honest with your team about recruiting. So can you share some of those with everybody?
Yeah, I'm super fortunate now that, it's a smaller team. Everyone to a person has been incredibly vocal about it being important that we achieve greater diversity. We're fairly diverse already, but you know, we have gaps and we've set goals and we're moving there. You know, as your organizations become larger and you know, you might have variances among different managers in terms of their actual commitment. I'm not talking about the sort of, you know, saluting the goal, but you know, when you really start looking at the numbers and you see who is hiring diverse candidates and who isn't, you have to get pretty surgical about that. And, you know, one tool is, you know, whether you're the one doing the interviewing or it's a person on your team, if the pool that they start sort of putting through the official interview loop is not diverse, then you have a 0% chance of ending up with a diverse hire. And I know that that sounds really basic, but it was actually super controversial when we sort of said that. And so whether you're making doing interviews and making the hire, or someone in your team is, just have a hard and fast rule that, you know, you cannot move from screening to interviewing until you have a truly diverse pool and you've got multiple qualified candidates. And then it becomes a business problem for that person. Like, well, this is a really important hire. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's also really important that we get it right. And so come back to me when you've done the work to source those candidates. And if that means you need to, again, to Priya's point, be going to different places, getting outside of your normal channels, like until it becomes you will not have approval to make a hire, even to go to interviews until you've done this, then you just force people to have skin in the game. And we got actually to the tougher, better conversations we needed to have with some of those folks who weren't quite as skin in the game by doing that. So that's, you know, just one really basic tool, I think.
Awesome. And I think we're talking about, in one way, we want to hire people that we could learn from and could do our job better than we can, because that's how we elevate our team. And at the same time, in the positions that we are in, we get to open the door for the next group of people and create opportunities that might not have been there because your cover letter didn't look the way that, you know, my university trained of what a cover letter should look like. And so what are some of those conversations and that you're having with your teams about taking a chance on people? Are there ways that those courageous conversations that you might be having with one another when you're comparing candidates? Does anyone feel comfortable sharing how we might call in instead of call out some of our peers when trying to think about hiring people from diverse backgrounds?
As a recruiting and staffing company, I could speak to this on two separate sides, one for hiring for our clients and then one for hiring our internal team members. We were very strict about writing down the sources from which we got our candidates, whether it was an employee referral, a friend referral, family referral, Jane Addams Resource Center, Aurora Food Bank, whatever it is. We wanted to track our sources, and we made it a business goal month over month to grow our unique sources of where we're finding candidates. Because I think both Priya and Jay already mentioned, it's easy to stick with your network. It's easy to stick with what you know. And it's difficult and uncomfortable to find those people, find those communities that you're not a part of. It requires a lot of legwork, a lot of research, and talking and meeting new people. But we made our business goal to grow our unique sources month over month. And we were very transparent with our internal team about growing these sources. And people were finding very creative ways to meet with new unemployment agencies, just community and neighborhood resource centers. And where was I? Oh my goodness. We were trying to really cast as wide of a net as possible and tracking it so we can make sure we actually are reaching out to communities that we're not a part of and being very open with our clients of what we're doing and with our internal team that this is an important business goal and we need to really monitor it. So just tracking this aspect in hiring for diversity as a KPI just as important as whatever your monthly revenue is.
And then did you incentivize your team at all? Like you were tracking it and then.
Yeah, we would do, so for our internal team, recruiters, a lot of them earn commission. So we would always do bonuses for new sources brought in, number of candidates placed from untapped pools or underutilized pools of candidates. So we'd always try and add bonuses to that and financially incentivize people, as well as celebrate these things in our daily meetings, weekly meetings, quarterly wrap-ups. We were always something we were discussing and really making sure everyone internally knew was important.
Great. And I think a question came in around what channels do you post jobs? Where are you finding people? I know I like to utilize like Chicago Queer Jobs Board on Facebook and then find places from that. Can you each share maybe somewhere outside of the standard LinkedIn, Indeed, whatever job sites folks are using? Does anyone have a unique one that you'd like to share?
One of our salespeople used to be a third shift welder for a fabrication company, and they would always go to a bar that was open at 5, 6 a.m. after their shift to drink with their buddies. He had the great idea of passing out business cards to all the bartenders at all these local industrial park drinking holes. And he was getting 20 referrals per month from all these different bartenders of, hey, I heard this guy talking about they're looking for a job. This woman's looking for and all of a sudden we're getting candidates that were referred to us after drinking after work, just through a bartender. So I thought that was very creative, and it helped us a lot.
That's really unique. What about other folks?
Well, in our business, one unique thing we do is I always want to hire people that really want to work for me and really want to and won't leave me for $5 more an hour. So we hire young people that are aging out of the foster system. So in Charlotte, kids that are aging out of foster care typically are relatively unskilled, undeveloped, but they're hungry. They want to work and they need to work. And I know that. And so we hire them, and we've had tremendous success. And it's a counterintuitive marketplace. A lot of people have followed what we've done and said, my God, why weren't we doing it years ago? They're not as pretty as some of the other candidates in the beginning, but in the end, again, with the passion and I'll teach you the skill. And so, we have, of our 52 employees, 30 of them have worked for us for 9 years or more, just to give you an example. So we take care of our people, but our people take care of us. And it starts by giving people a chance, give them a break, give them an opportunity. Redemption is around every corner for all of us. And so foster children are unique because they are, life is sort of giving them a little bit of shit sandwich, and it's not their fault. They were just born into a world that didn't necessarily cut them some slack on the front end. Well, folks like us can create a much different ending than their beginning. And so we have power to do that, and they will return that in spades in terms of their commitment to the cause of your organization, the cause of your company. I can promise you that from my own experience.
That's wonderful to hear, especially I'm sitting actually in our group home for young people who are youth in care in the state of Illinois. And so knowing that there are people investing in the young people, because we do know that so many systems fail people. So giving folks a second chance means a lot to me. So I appreciate you sharing that. To pivot to our next question. So some of us are pausing hiring. Some of us are needing to have essential workers in the office more than ever. How do you know when you are ready to hire? So for folks maybe reflecting on your experience when you were just starting up your business, when do we make that next step of knowing that it's time to bring on someone else?
I'll just say I think it's spreadsheet plus gut. I mean, you got to have a really good sense of the fundamentals of your business, but our pipeline, our sales cycle to bring on a new client can sometimes be 3 or 6 months, and you can't always wait until you're far down that path to sort of start moving toward a hire. So, there are definitely sometimes you have to sit down with your finance person and sort of say, I see what's on the spreadsheet, but these are the 5 conversations I had this week that made me feel like it's time. And I think at minimum, that signal should tell you, like, I need to really be investing a couple more hours a week in sort of the talent side of the equation, because I'm likely to be at that point.
I think for us, and I guess it may be true for most entrepreneurial companies, right? We are always trying to hire for the next phase, right? Not that we're always successful, right? Like, because the reality of a lot of that stuff is you always feel like you're playing catch up, right? And then the second part of that reality is for most entrepreneurs, what does your funding pipeline looks like, right? Do you, even if you think you want to hire or you believe in it, do you have the funds to be able to do that as well, right? So like what Jay was saying too, like part of it is like some of that aspect of it, but we're always looking at, we got into what we do is to grow the business and take it to the next level, right? So what do we need for the next level? Because if we get to that level, one, can we even get there without those people on board? That's one question. The second thing is, once you get there, if you don't have the people on board, have you wasted that, right? So always, almost always thinking about what's next and do we have the people for that? That's one thing for us, but also given that we work in multiple locations, right? We are always also looking for beyond the next step is what does our bench strength look like, right? So we have some critical components of our business in order to be able to deliver the services that we do. So those are the factors we're looking at, but it's always thinking out ahead. But then you have to do that reality check. Okay, can I or not? And if not, what is it going to take me to be able to get there? Whether that's funding, whether it's the team, whether it's the role that you've been thinking about, if you've developed that or not.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to add to that? Chuck?
Well, to build on what Sak said, my company's not growing now, but when we were growing, what I discovered is that the people that were good at helping me grow my company and getting me to where I wanted to go weren't the same people that were going to help me sustain it. Sustainers are different than growers. Growers are, they're go-getters. They're hungry. They like to build stuff and leave. They're sort of like, the neighborhood dog that wanders around and chases all the female dogs. They don't stick around for very long. They're gone. The people that are the sustainers are the ones that are more mission-centered. And so for me, I made the mistake of thinking that the people that helped me get there were the people that were going to help me stay there. I learned differently. And so I ended up having to make decisions to hire. And of course, you can't hire the sustainers until you achieve the plateau or the level of the benchmark, if you will, that you've set for yourself as an organization. So I would just say be careful when you're talking about skill or passion to make sure that you understand the difference between the people that want to build it and the people that want to sustain it.
And early on in our company, we made a lot of mistakes hiring, and we learned from it. And till the day, till just last month, we were still learning new things with making bad decisions and bad mistakes, and that happens to everybody. One thing that became apparent to me pretty early on when we were growing the company in a rapid state of change, rapid state of growth, our organization was changing on a weekly basis. And we made a couple errors in hiring people that weren't ready for that type of environment because we didn't really tell them that was the environment they were coming into. And one of the things I learned is that if I can feel comfortable hiring somebody and knowing that they will be successful in their role, whatever we're hiring them for, if I don't show up, if I just stop showing up to work tomorrow and knowing that person will be successful in the role, then I know I'm ready to hire for that role or for that department. It takes a lot of introspection and reorganizing yourself, how your company functions, how knowledge is transferred from one area to the next, between teams and people, and just having trust in the organization itself without me in it, helped me really get my gut feeling in check to know that, okay, we can hire, we can move forward for this.
Awesome, thank you. Before we get into some Q&A, we're bringing folks in, we're finding them, but then how are you keeping them? So Billy, you have folks that have been there for many years. What are some strategies that you have found have been, and we recognize that some people are just gonna come in and do what they need to do to help us grow and then move on. But what are some of the things that you have found that have helped people feel like you were investing in them, in your organization?
Well, the first mistake I made is thinking that if you pay people more, they'll stay longer. That's not true. Sometimes wanderlust, more money is fertilizer for people that have wanderlust. So for me, people will support that which they help to create. So I give people ownership in my company by asking every employee in my company to tell me what I don't know. Tell me what I need to know. Tell me how we can get better today. Let me help make you better. You help make me better. My employees all are empowered to tell me exactly what's not working in my company. And there's no who, it's all about what. And so my housekeepers are critical of every part of the operation, and my managers can weigh in on, the types of appliances we're using in our bathrooms, in our restrooms, in the facilities. So everybody is empowered to take ownership in the company. And I think people enjoy working where they are heard and where people care what they think. And frankly, when they walk around our hotels, they can say, that's because of me. I did that. That wasn't there 6 months ago, but because of an idea or some feedback that I provided, the owner, he made that happen. People really take great pride in it. And I've found that even our bellman will tell people, I created that. That was my idea. And our customers love to hear people take pride in their work. I mean, how weird is that? It's almost insurgent, for people to actually care about where they work and take pride in it, as opposed to it being a task or a toil. So give your employees an opportunity to own outcomes, and they will reward you with longevity, because you will become like family, right? It's kind of hard to leave a place that you helped to build.
I love that, Billy. In our industry, in the investment industry, it's still often described as an apprenticeship business, and I think it is. There's technical skills, but it's kind of its own trade in a way. And with that, the promise I always make to anyone I ever hire, particularly in an investment role, but really anywhere, but that's just primarily who I've hired given my role, is that I will make them better. I will be candid with them. I will help them improve, and I'm dedicated to that. And I will be their mentor. They can have other mentors too, but I'm not a boss, like a boss trying to squeeze every ounce out of you. I'm a boss who's a mentor, who's here to get you better. And that the moment this is no longer the right place for you, the moment you've outgrown the firm or the role and there's no place for you, I will be your biggest champion to find you the best job out of here. And I will use my Rolodex, and I will commit to that. And I find that makes them, it kind of cuts through it. Like, I think the tension always around, like, you can't tell your boss when you're unhappy or when you're looking, like, it's kind of gone, because it's like, that's cool. Let's talk about the end of this. This will end one day, and this is how it will end. I will help you, and therefore, while you're here, you will help me, and it will be a good partnership. And that's kind of the approach we try to take as a firm. And we really do believe that, that's kind of the obligation, the commitment that an employer makes, if you're going to expect an employee to give a lot to their job, that it's kind of like the relationship extends beyond.
That's awesome. I really appreciate you sharing that.
I guess one thing I would add that's a little more operational is just onboarding. And especially as your organization grows, you can't take any of that for granted. Like, literally the horror of like, what do you mean nobody took that person to lunch on their first day? Like, you know, what do you mean they had questions that we didn't answer about their benefits? You know, some of those things can really fall through the cracks. And I think nothing ends the new employee honeymoon faster than those sorts of experiences. So I think really investing time on that. Some of that is very human. It's also like tools like Slack now make it really easy to sort of like automate these like, hey, you've been here for 2 weeks, like reminder on this, or go to this person for that. And even things that can feel a little trite, like buddy systems, like really make a difference. The other thing related to that is if you think that's important for somebody coming in from a similar job, from a similar company who sort of knows the ropes, if you have been successful in bringing somebody in from a different background and you have not thought through that onboarding and that like, you know, who's their buddy, who's their mentor, what's their escalation if they're really not getting the experience they were promised, it has to be like onboarding on steroids, or you will lose more than half of those people who you work so hard to bring in.
I think that's a good reminder, especially when we're short-staffed. And so we're like, well, just here you go, like here, read the handbook, like when you get home, like we need a body in the chair. And then because you're doing 3 people's jobs and that's why you're bringing this person on, but then you're not setting yourself up to be successful. So that's a good reminder. Chuck, I think you were going to go next.
Yeah, one thing that we would do internally with our employees is goal setting and incorporating personal goals into quarterly reviews and their overall growth in the business and their success there. We never forced any employee to take part of that or share their personal goals with us if they would never feel comfortable. But oftentimes the environment that we aim to create, and I think we were pretty successful at, was incorporating these personal goals. For example, we had an employee whose goal was to add an addition onto her house so her grandmother can move in with them. Her grandmother was aging, didn't have enough room at her mom's house to live, the grandmother's daughter, to live there, and she wanted to provide a nicer life for her. So we're like, okay, let's talk about this. So we made sure every week in our one-on-ones to ask, okay, how's the progress going on this? Are these activities at work contributing to those activities outside of work that you want to accomplish? And really personalizing for every single employee, whatever they're working on here, it might allow them to make money or be more comfortable financially. But if they can't tie their work life to their personal life, and that they're fulfilling both, whether you're in the office or not in the office, we're able to create a much more tight-knit, open community with our employees. And we had a team of 7 people, so it was very easy for us to accomplish this. It would be quite difficult to do on a larger scale, but making sure to really personalize everything about the role, about the job, and tie that back into whatever that employee's personal goals are, personal life, whatever they're dealing with, helping them through that and getting them to see that the structure I have at work, I might be able to apply to my personal life outside of work.
Great. Anyone else want to jump in? Okay, so answering some of our audience questions, David asked, what do you tell the candidate during the interview to make sure that they are comfortable with the constantly changing environment of a smaller and growing company?
Similar to what Priya was mentioning earlier, is in our main conference room, one of the walls was an entire whiteboard. We'd always talk about what's on the whiteboard. People would ask, and it usually on the whiteboard was whatever I was just mindlessly jotting down at 2 a.m. the previous night because I'm freaking out and pulling my hair out because we need to make money and I need to have a business tomorrow. And I would tell them my thought process of why I wrote it, what I'm working on. I don't know what it means. What do you think of it? In just showing them my failures and my struggles from 12 hours ago. And hey, now I'm here to talk about an interview. Let's go. I would lead with that. But from the very beginning, I think it's less about like telling a candidate during an interview versus what type of environment you create for the interview. So my very first contact with them, whether it's via email or on the phone, from then on, before they're coming into our office or we're meeting for coffee, whatever it is, I would send a full bullet pointed schedule of this is what we're going to do and this is what we're going to talk about. I'm going to spend 2 minutes introducing myself. I want you to spend 2 minutes introducing yourself. I'm going to talk about this. Here's what we're looking for. These are the questions I'm going to ask you about. These are the topics I'd love to discuss with you. Give them time to think about those things before they come in for an interview. I want a candidate to know that this is an open and transparent process because I want to cut the BS. Don't give me answers you rehearsed because this isn't going to be a Q&A session. It's going to be a discussion. So creating an open environment for discussion allows me to talk to this candidate and say, listen, this company doesn't look like what it did a week ago, and I hope it doesn't look this way a week from now. And I don't know what it's going to look like. And I started this thing. I don't expect you to know what it looks like. Are you comfortable in that environment? It just very like overplaying even how difficult it is and how much of a hellscape it has been working here, and just really being just bluntly honest. Like, listen, I was here till 2 a.m. for the past week and I'm exhausted. I don't know what I'm doing. Are you cool with that? Do you want to join in on this? And just being brutally honest. And it sounds silly, but it really helped us find people that were attracted to that mission, that were attracted to the early stage of a startup, and had good ideas to add to the company.
I'll just say that showing it, not telling it, is actually the key. And then watch and listen, because there's people who lean in and they get energized by that and they follow up on that, and then there are people who are like, "Oh yes, I understand," and they're going to fail. So it's more about watching their reaction to you showing than you telling them anything.
Similar note, like I honestly care at least as much about the questions that the candidate is asking me as I do about their answers. Like anybody can fake a decent answer to any question that I'm going to ask, but it shows real thought and the kind of adaptability that I think you need to succeed in a smaller growing organization, to have really thoughtful, incisive questions. So I've definitely come out of an interview saying, well, they kind of bombed the answers, but their questions were awesome. So let's move them forward.
Yeah, I'm always surprised when I say, well, what questions do you have for me? And folks say, oh, I think you've already answered all of them. I'm like, you're joining our family here. This is going to consume most of your life. You know, what else has come up for you in this moment? Chuck, I appreciate the way that you outline asking people ahead of time. From a social work perspective, that is a trauma-informed practice. And regardless of if you're a social service agency or not, that is helping your employees in their wellness. So you get like a pat on the back for that social work point. I also wanted to make sure that we name how our world is changing around like sexual orientation and gender identity, and thinking about how we are onboarding folks who may be non-binary into our organization. I know as I am interviewing candidates who may use they, them pronouns or identify as genderqueer, anywhere else outside of the typical binary, of also preparing our HR folks to make sure that they're using the right pronouns when they're reaching out to people to set up time to do paperwork and things like that. Has anyone had experience onboarding trans folks who may have a different legal name than the name they go by, and some of the things that you want people to make sure that they're doing to not mess up that time from offering someone a position to them getting in the door and feeling like they're going to be welcomed and respected?
You know, more experience managing through someone's transition who's already there, which presents its own challenges. The only other thing I will say is, you know, super open to it, but one of our employees, you know, based on some of their work in the community, felt really strongly that we needed to add pronouns to our email signatures. And I was like, great, that's super. And, you know, small teams sort of felt like everybody was equipped and made it clear that you didn't have to add that if you weren't comfortable doing it. It's been shocking how many journalists, senior executives at our clients, you know, once you add that, like that is an invitation for everybody to ask you a question. And I just think it really raised for me the degree to which, you know, don't assume that there's alignment. Don't assume that everybody is ready to answer those questions, even if they're super well-meaning. And just, you know, it's a multi-step process to, even when there's great intent, to really be ready to do that. And it's super scary for a 24-year-old to be like, our clients, like CCO just asked me why I have these pronouns after my name. Like, what do I say? So it's journey. And it's just a reminder that like, we've had this little tiny moment of discomfort. Like it gives you like the first iota of what somebody's dealing with on a daily basis. And you've just been uncomfortable for 30 seconds. Like it's a good reminder that there's a lot of work that we all have to do.
Yeah, and you know, I work in queer youth space, and so almost all of us have our pronouns in our signature, and a lot of times people will say, even have a little line underneath that says, what does that mean, or why are my pronouns in there, or just you can click on it and then it will explain, so that we get to educate folks. I know when we had a candidate who was non-binary who was hired, I made sure to explain to our HR person that we should ask them what sex or designation they want their insurance company to know them by, versus making that assumption and checking those boxes. And so those are some of the things that maybe other folks might not be thinking about, that could make a really smooth transition. And then when you're doing the work as the employer of saying, you know, Taylor is coming, they are so excited to be a part of the team, and really queuing them up with their pronouns, I've found has been really successful. So I just wanted to make sure we touched on that, especially as we think about how trans and non-binary folks are unemployed and underemployed in our community, and this is a really good opportunity for us to use our privilege to give folks an opportunity. So we are at we have potentially 15 minutes left. Does anyone else have anything that they want to add, or anybody watching have any questions for the panelists? And while we wait for those to come, again, for our panelists, thank you for sharing so many of your tidbits of wisdom. Is there any like final comments that each of you might want to share as people go out into the world and hire new folks?
Well, I'll start. You know, everything in life is explained by physics. And if you're starting a company, the most critical thing you can do is understand that you have to maintain momentum, and it's very hard to do. Momentum in physics is P equals mv, mass times velocity. Mass is having enough of the right people to maintain the move forward, and then velocity in the case of human beings is passion and skill. So mass times velocity equals momentum. Don't ever let your organization fail because you don't have enough of the right people with the passion and the skill to do the job and to carry you forward. We're all A-type personalities here. I suspect most people who start companies are. You can't do it by yourself. You're not the smartest guy in the room. As soon as you realize that, you'll do better.
I'll add to that, to the, be humble. Like, I think it's just a great, it's a great responsibility to be hiring people, and a great amount of power, not just with that individual, but that power dynamic in society. And so it should be undertaken with a great degree of, humility and responsibility, I would say. So.
I would say that you are going to make mistakes. Everybody will, and be able to own up to them and not stick with the bad hire because of the bad decisions because it goes both ways, right? There are things that you're going to do wrong that you should have done better. There are things that they're not going to do right. For one reason or another, you'll realize that the decision was wrong or it wasn't the right fit. And I think very often, this is something I know we are guilty of, sometimes you stick with that way longer than you should have. Whether it's pride, whether it's a lot of other reasons, whether because you're always feeling like you're playing catch up, but that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that we have made, and in many ways continue to make. So something that, yeah.
Chuck or
I think
Jay?
we get a little bit hung up on the judgment that we're making as a manager hiring somebody. But at that final step, I'm like, I'm making this judgment once, and then this person will be exercising judgment on my behalf as long as they're here. So that final step of like, they sound good, the resume is good, the references are good, whatever those things are, like, do I trust this person's judgment? And that's as complex as the environment has gotten in so many ways, like that's kind of the critical final thing that I think I'm paying more attention to now.
I think in a traditional sense or a very old school type of way, hiring was seen as a hierarchical thing and a me versus you, not even a conversation, like an interrogation almost, whether it's an interview process or an application process. Cut all that BS out. This is something that should be collaborative, and this is something that should be more about what you guys can create together, what your team can do, adding new people into it versus what does this employee have to offer me potentially. I think it's important to, whether you have old job descriptions you've been using, if you found a template online, trash it, rip it up, think about what are the 5 things this person needs to be able to do at my company and write that down. For qualifications, I don't care what you write. You can't legally be held responsible for writing fake qualifications or things that are unattainable, whatever it is. I'm not a lawyer, by the way. Please do not take anything I say as legal advice. I had to put that disclaimer there. But your job description is a way that you can advertise what you're looking for. And I mentioned earlier, it's not about X amount of years in Y industry. It's more about this is what we're building and we're looking for somebody to help build this with us. If you have those skills, let's talk and talk openly about that. The first book I read when I started getting into recruiting was The Essential Guide for Hiring and Getting Hired by Lou Adler. I believe Lou Adler's from Australia. He's started recruiting companies all over the world for the past 40 years. It can get kind of preachy sometimes, but I think the root of it is all of that. It's you're hiring a person, you're not hiring a resume. Your job description isn't whatever you put on Indeed. It's not that. It's actually representative of the work that needs to get done within your organization, and you should treat things as such. I firmly believe that the best hiring decisions, even when I was unsure of myself and unsure of my company, came from a place when I knew I was being open and transparent, and I know the other person on the other side of the table from me felt comfortable enough to be vulnerable and open and transparent with me, and we were able to make really good things happen. So just following that, that's sort of how my gut works, and it hasn't led me to astray yet. I haven't completely failed and run out of business yet. So I'm going to keep following that until I figure out something better, because I know there's always a new way to do things, and approach your hiring that way. And if anybody here attending is currently recruiting for jobs or will be in the future, send me an email, give me a call. I geek out on this stuff. I will look over your job description. I'll give you hot takes. I'll tell you things you might not want to hear, and I'll give you praise where it's due. And I love discussing these things. Please reach out. I'm happy to be a resource to anybody here involved with StartOut.
Very cool. Well, I know I learned a lot, and I really appreciate getting to hear all of these different perspectives. So I want to, again, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you for all of our panelists for your time tonight. And I think that's about wraps us up. So enjoy the rest of your Wednesday evening.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Thanks to all the panelists.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Bye-bye.